My name is Rebecca Anderson. I'm a clinical psychologist, and if you've clicked on this video because you're someone who is defensive, can I just say I'm really proud of you, because I know people pleasing and perfectionism, they're thrown around a lot. They won't come in often and say they're defensive, but defensiveness is just as common as those other ways of coping, and it makes just as much sense as a coping mechanism. Let's pretend you have just cooked your partner some eggs for breakfast. You've gotten up, you've made them some eggs, and then they turn to you and they kind of say, oh, these eggs are a bit funny. If you are defensive, what your reaction is probably going to be is some version of rebuttal, some version of a wall coming up, and it's going to look like, oh, well, that's the last time I cooked you eggs for breakfast, or maybe I would have had more time to make the eggs if you'd actually helped me instead of been lying in bed. Or over explaining, I didn't have time because we didn't get the good eggs this time. This is a different brand to normal, and that's not my fault because you were the one who did the shopping. Or, well, so what if the eggs aren't good? You didn't clean the bathroom last night. I've been doing lots of things around the house. Essentially, if we slow that process down, what's happened is that there's been a perceived criticism. You've had a moment of vulnerability, which I'm going to come back to, and this moment of vulnerability has often been a nanosecond. Like sometimes it is half a split second, and then your walls have come up, your coping mode has come in. It's like armor to protect you, and absolutely no way is this person feeling vulnerable or not good enough, and I'm gonna send it back to you, which is the defense. What this tells me when someone comes in who has defensiveness is typically one of three things, and sometimes all of these three things. One, you have grown up in an environment where you were very harshly punished for making very reasonable, normal mistakes as a child. Two, you had a defensive parent, and this is just what you saw modeled as a way to communicate, and you couldn't admit you were wrong. Or three, you were neurodivergent. Particularly if you had ADHD, people with ADHD are criticized 20,000 more times by the age of 10 than a neurotypical child. Constantly being told, you're not good enough, you're too much, you're too loud, you need to be doing more, you need to stop moving, you need to sit there. Constant criticism. So if you grow up in any of those environments where it's essentially blame or be blamed, then of course it's adaptive to come up with defensiveness as a coping strategy. Imagine if you didn't develop defensiveness, you would just have no sense of self-worth if you grew up in an environment like that. It can feel like accepting blame, accepting that maybe the eggs weren't the best, feels like I have to admit that I'm not good enough and that I'm a shit person. Whereas for people who maybe grew up with not particularly harsh parenting, normal consequences, not particularly criticized, an egg is just an egg. And that's why they can say, you're right, the eggs are a little bit runny this morning. And it ends there. If you really want to overcome defensiveness, I would say you need a two kind of prong approach. The first thing, I would recommend you need to be doing some sort of somatic therapy. So what that means is involving not just talking, but also your body. So schema therapy that uses imagery, EMDR, which uses eye movements and tapping. You want to access that part of you and heal that part of you that feels not good enough, because otherwise any time in your life when someone makes ambiguous comments towards you, you're going to get triggered. And that is just life, right? That's going to be all the time. People are making comments like that, and that's so unpleasant for you to experience. And it can also impact your relationships around you. The second element is, and this is easier to do when you've healed the first part, is really on a deep level understand that it is not about right and wrong. It is you and say your partner, or you and your friend versus the issue. What's more important than you being right is your relationship. Sometimes that does mean in relationships we let things go. The other thing you want to think about is, one, how you give criticism, but also how you perceive criticism. So think about for a moment, if someone was giving you feedback, how would you want them to give it? To start to break this pattern, you have to understand what makes you less defensive in general. I know in general as a human, I'm less defensive when I feel understood. So for example, in the egg situation, you might say, look, to be fair, I know the eggs are a bit runny and you don't really like the runny eggs because I know you got sick at that cafe 2 weeks ago when they had runny eggs. But when the first thing you say is that you're criticizing my meal, it makes me upset. So what I've done there is I've given them the benefit of the doubt, but I've also said my vulnerability underneath, not attacked. The other thing is you can use that rule of thumb when you're giving criticism. So perhaps they didn't clean the bathroom correctly, and it might be saying, hey, I know you've got a lot on your plate at the moment and I really appreciate that you did the toilet, but I noticed that you didn't do the shower. Would you be able to do that this afternoon? Remember, you're often going to feel most defensive about things that hit a sore spot for you. So for example, maybe with that cooking example, that would have been absolutely fine for you. You would have said, oh yeah, the eggs are a little bit runny, even if you feel like in general you are a pretty defensive person. But maybe if they made a criticism about something you were wearing or your maths ability, you might flare up instantly. And what we often find is that the places that you have the insecurities are deep rooted in other memories. Maybe you had a teacher in year 3 that told you would amount to nothing in maths class, or you were teased about your fashion sense in year 9, but cooking was always fine. You always knew you were a good cook, so it doesn't really matter if someone says, oh, the eggs are running. Yeah, fair point. If you're watching this video, it tells me that you do care about like your relationships and you want things to be different, and you can absolutely change if you would like. Defensiveness is just a coping mode that you learned at some point in your life that was probably very helpful, and it's just not as helpful right now. I hope this was helpful for you. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll speak to you soon.